Welcome to Design Nerds Anonymous, the podcast that sparks curiosity at the intersection of business and design. I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, founder and president at ThinkLab. With the help of my fellow podcaster, Kaylin Reed from the Alternative Design Podcast with Kimball International, over the past 4 weeks, we've been sharing nuanced insights around each of 4 vertical markets, including corporate, education, healthcare, and today, multifamily and hospitality. This is the final episode of our current mini-season. And spoiler alert, we had originally intended this episode to be just about hospitality. But we loved some of the feedback from a few of our research participants on the developer side who specialize in multifamily and student living. And a lot of their insight really aligned with some of the big themes from hospitality. So we're bringing you a whole bunch of perspective in this episode. Even if you've tuned in today because you specialize in hospitality or multifamily, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to our past 3 episodes. One of our goals of this mini-season is to cross-pollinate. We saw lots of success across sectors from our live events that took place as part of this research. And we wanted to bring that to your earbuds and your brain. We believe each of us has a lot to learn from even the sectors that we don't work in. Now, as you likely heard, this 4-part mini-season is a prequel to Season 6, which will release this fall, where we'll dig even deeper and offer more ideas, tools, and insights to help fuel inspirational discussions within your project teams. Each year, we build our storytelling around ThinkLab's hackathon, our biggest research project of the year. And throughout this year, we're exploring the future of customer decision-making. Put simply, we're hearing that decisions for the built environment are taking longer, and we wanted to know why. So let's dig in. In this episode, we'll share insights from the hospitality and multifamily sectors. We've recently conducted 6 months of research with decision makers for the built environment from hundreds of companies, including hospitality decision makers from IHG, Marriott, Hilton, Chick-fil-A, and many, many more. We also had great feedback from folks in the developer sector, including Core Spaces, RXR, Sterling Bay, LG, and more. While we won't have time to share all of these insights from both of these sectors, we'll bring you the big ideas that overlapped. So, what can we all learn from these folks, regardless of if we focus on these sectors today? Let's start with this common question that you've heard across all of the episodes this mini-season. We asked our research participants to share one word that describes how the decision-making process has changed over the past 5 years. Here are some of their responses.
Adaptable. My name is Hallie Hannaford. I work for Chick-fil-A, and I'm on the restaurant design team. The areas that I'm responsible for are really the customer-facing areas of the restaurant. I think the market has changed so much, the customers have changed so much, the needs, the prices have changed so much. We've just learned that we just have to adapt to in the moment because solutions still have to make it out to the field as quickly as we can get them to the field because our operators and their team members and their customers are all relying on those solutions in order to do their job and do it well and represent the brand and allow us a platform to continue to serve and care our customers and a platform for growth to continue to operate for other customers. So it has been truly a game of adaptability for us.
My name is Carrie Manami. I am a design director at a New York City and Miami-based firm, and we specialize in the hospitality sector. My one word would be flexibility. In designing, we look at both the built experience and the social experience of any space. And the way that we use and occupy spaces has just changed significantly over the past few years, which likely started from the impacts of COVID. We live in more uncertain times where we question the permanence of spaces more, and we look for flexibility of how a space can adapt to the changing demands of users. In the hospitality realm, there's also been a larger emphasis on co-working spaces, more hybrid usages in a similar way where a space used one way during the day can then adapt to a different usage at night. I think in seeing how people are changing the way we occupy spaces, the way we design also needs to remain flexible.
My name is Carly. I am a project manager for a developer with a focus on hospitality. Over the past 4 years, one word to describe how our process has changed is iterative. It's been looking at various design problems But rather than one solution really bringing us to that endpoint, we really attack it from multiple different scenarios.
My name is Mitch Dalton. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Core Spaces. How the project process has changed, rocky, I guess. Rocky in the sense that you can see where you need to go. You need to all climb this mountain. There's a lot more boulders and things, hazards that you have to overcome to get there.
Luke Roberts. I am the creative director at LG Group in Chicago. I would say the word to describe the change has been proof. I feel like we have a lot of people want big ideas. They want you to show them something new, be exciting, but then they don't want the risk. They want the proof. They want to see where it's been done before. So we live in that balance.
Yeah, it's a tough place to live.
So to summarize, from our developer participants, we heard words like slow, proof, pivoting, compressed, iterative, and rocky. Then from our hospitality participants, we heard words like hurried, agile, chaotic, flexible, and adaptable. Many underline the need for more speed to market and the need to change and streamline the existing process and response. For both of these sectors, many of these words underline the need for more speed to market and also the need to change, evolve, and streamline our current and accepted process and response. A lot of this also has to do with the scope of change that's happened and, I'll say, opportunity that's opened up. Many want to carpe the diem, if you will, but standard processes are often too slow for these sectors. One of the main themes that came through for both of these audiences in response to change over the past few years was something I would consider a previous bad word to most of us who grew up in the design realm. But today, from our client's perspective, it is now truly a must-have and even signals a partner who really gets it. So what's the word? Value engineering. Here's a quote from one of our anonymous research participants, and then you'll hear from Carly and Carrie again.
The thing I value most from project partners these days is a willingness to be early in the project and think about optionality and VE and creativity. The more they feel empowered to be a part of the team and bring ideas. Creativity and tenacity are paramount right now. VE and creativity have to go hand in hand in our world.
One way that value engineering, I think, has improved for us over the past few years is knowing that there is less room for error. The intent is to go into it with everyone being as looped into the project goals and project budget from the start. There's the understanding of this is where we need to be. So we've started schematic design or design development with a target, and the consultants have been great at responding to that.
I would agree that VE is integrated into our process to, of course, maintain budgets. Another thing in VE is we always think about the longevity of a space, especially in hospitality spaces. So when we're thinking about where to cut costs and where to invest, we think about how long is the intention of this space? Is this a 1-year plan? Is this a 5-year plan? Are they thinking of staying here for 20 years? And those kinds of data or information can also help inform us to make those decisions where to cut costs and where to invest.
Here's Hallie with Chick-fil-A again, with an example that shares the complexity emerging, but also the great opportunity in this category.
For us in particular, the complexity that's come since COVID, and really it's been an opportunity for sales channels that have opened up because digital became just so commonplace immediately with the result of COVID. That meant we went from serving customers in the dining room or in the drive-thru to as a mobile customer in the drive-thru or a traditional customer in the drive-thru, a mobile customer in the dining room, a traditional customer in the dining room, a mobile customer in carry-out or traditional in carry-out, a mobile pickup customer or a third-party delivery customer. We've also opened up Chick-fil-A delivery that operates similarly to third-party, but it's owned and operated by us. So it's us taking the food from the restaurant to a customer's home. So there are more than 10 ways that a customer can approach and receive food from us, which wasn't there before COVID. So that complexity opened up a whole lot of opportunities for us to think about why and how are customers engaging us? What's their preferred method for engaging us? Why is that their preferred method? How does the space reflect and provide comfort and the solution for them to know what to do when they come to a space via that channel, complexity has been a huge addition to our world.
For most of the vertical markets we've looked at, we've understood that the process is slower for a variety of reasons. However, in hospitality and for most of our developers, it's actually forcibly faster. It simply has to be. And this is why the best partners understand this need for speed and why value engineering can't be a bad word or even a requested part of the process, but must be an integral and built-in part of the project process for the built environment, not last-minute rework. Now, a reason we merged hospitality and multifamily together in this episode is because much of the feedback we received was in alignment. Our talented data visualizers at ThinkLab created a heat map that shows where each vertical is feeling the most pain. The more intense the color, the more consolidated the pain is. And as you'll suspect, based on everything I've said so far, the pain maps for hospitality and our developers in the multifamily sectors looked surprisingly similar. And we heard from our survey data that in many cases, these sectors are feeling change from recent years the most intensely. 64%, the highest of any sector, said that cost pressures were greatly affecting the decision process. 56%, also the highest of any sector, said that they were affected by more people on the decision team. 40%, also the highest of any sector, said that their clients want more data to make decisions. Now, much like several other sectors, the most pain was concentrated up front to the internal planning and design process. Here's why. Number one, navigating internal alignment. Upfront, in the internal planning stage, they're laying the foundation for success and hopefully getting alignment. In hospitality, we heard that the team is widened as the project progresses, and sometimes those stakeholders include brand teams to investors to owners and ultimately sometimes even guests. But if you don't have upfront expectation alignments from key early constituents, being the owner, manager, and brand, you'll often have misunderstandings later. Add to this turbulence in this economic environment of turnover, and you often have new team members to get up to speed on these fast-moving projects. Here's Carly and Carrie again, who you heard in the beginning.
I'd say that one of the pain points in the process would be the internal planning phases. When we're at the outset and about to start making decisions, it's nailing down that budget, knowing what the design intent is for the either end user, the brand, but also for our internal and external partners within our own firm.
I would tend to agree as well. From a design perspective, in some projects, we can have what you call too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. Each party can have their own perspective or angle on how they envision the space or how the primary function of the space should be. Our perspective as designers is to offer creative solutions to ensure the primary goals of the spaces are fulfilled while not compromising on design intent. And I think that we're in a unique position to really creatively reimagine and rethink about what's possible. So we strive to balance those conflicting goals while thinking of the end user. And I think what's really interesting in those kind of conflicting conversations is that in designing hospitality spaces, we always want to evoke a feeling, that kind of encompassing feeling when you enter a space that can evoke a mood or like a state of mind. So even in these discussions where there can be conflicting goals, that notion of evoking that feeling and creating a space where one would want it to stay, that goal is often maintained throughout as a shared goal.
Number two, like many other sectors, cost pressures. We've mentioned pain around the rework that happens in the costing phase of the design process, which was felt here tenfold in this accelerated timeline. Keeping everyone aligned through initial design and then realigning with each redesign as the team widens was unanimously painful, especially with an inherent lack of transparency in our traditional costing process. Add to this the mounting pressures in this economic inflationary environment. Owners are faced with renovate or build new. The cost to build or even ability to find funding is often prohibitive today. But the competition in this sector is fierce, still feeling the ripple effects of the pandemic, as many hospitality properties depleted their funds just trying to keep their doors open. But now, as the world feels fully reopened and many are feeling the pressure to renovate after being on pause, today, guest expectations are not being met and rating scores are going down, leading to pressure to renovate or lose occupancy. And the same funding and financing pressures apply to developers. For them, it's not about fear of spending, but about spending wisely, not only with literal costs and funds, but also their time and even consulting fees. It's about value and longevity. The first two quotes are anonymized from some of our conversations in the multifamily sector, and then you'll hear from Carrie again.
Architects want to put their stamp on a building, but why are we focusing on the parapet detail and then you specified a cheap metal front door? Focus the effort and money on the places that matter to me. That's street level and amenity spaces.
Budget always has a huge weight on our process, definitely. But of course, as a designer, we're thinking about the end user, but we've also been hearing a lot of opinions on the operations and the function and the maintenance staff of how they're going to operate the spaces to run smoothly. So there's a lot more considerations beyond just the end user that we're taking into account, especially for hospitality projects, because we always think about durability, longevity, etc. We've always heard of these opinions, but I will say that it has probably intensified over the past few years, maybe from the woes of COVID, maybe from what's going on in the world. But I think a lot more people are more outspoken on the needs of spaces as well.
Lastly, and perhaps most intensely in this sector, was finding data to make decisions. But the nuance here is the incredible complexity that Hallie described earlier in this episode. Today, we're often designing for needs that simply didn't exist before, and doing so while moving faster than ever. So let's pause here for another game of Would You Rather. Ask yourself, would you rather A, make decisions with no data at all, or B, follow your competitors with a solid set of data? We'll reveal the full results of this question later in Season 6. But suffice to say, the hospitality and multifamily sectors are struggling with this very debate. Most want to be innovative, but lack the data. You heard this from Luke in the beginning.
They want you to show them something new, be exciting, but then they don't want the risk, they want the proof, they want to see where it's been done before. So we live in that balance.
Yeah, it's a tough place to live.
Here's Mitch, a participant from our Chicago session, who you also heard in the intros, who suggests it may not be the data that they need at all. And this relates back to pain point number 2, about adding value to the process.
Some knowledge is power, but sometimes information can get in the way of progress. In the last 4 years, I think people's lenses have become very myopic with what they need to do or what they need to get done. Context is everything.
Yeah.
When you think about the built environment and how you actually get to a project and the process that you need to follow, it can be really long and arduous, and it's very, very complicated, and it's not streamlined. Every space, every building, every piece of property is incredibly different. I have a limited amount of time with my design partners to articulate as much as I possibly can, and they try to force a project program, and that's fine, that's great. I can't necessarily determine what that program is until I understand the constraints of a specific space. So that collaboration, I think, has gone away because you don't have as much face-to-face time, and you can do charrettes and vision sessions and all of those things, and those are great. But I think that interaction between the developer, owner, end user, and architect need to be not so project specific. And from what it sounds like across the board, it sounds like people would be very interested in that. I mean, they showed up today and gave some great insights, and I think it was a phenomenal event, but I want more follow-up so that we can take what their pain points are as A&D professionals and build in some of those time contingencies into our own internal process. And it's all about productivity because it's a fee-based business. And I understand that. It's the same thing with us. I got to get this stuff done so I can keep moving on to the next and the next and the next thing, right? I would like to take that opportunity to improve our process and maybe hopefully help out other people in the industry as well.
What Mitch so eloquently highlights here is that while everyone wants more data, it can actually lead to analysis paralysis at times in the project process. because so much is changing so quickly. What we might actually need even more is better communication with all the players throughout the project process. All right, so I want to give a big thank you to all of our interviewees in this episode, Hallie, Carrie, Carly, Mitch, and Luke, as well as all of those who put the anonymous in Design Nerds Anonymous. Now that we have all of this collective perspective and understanding, in the second half of this episode, we're going to give you context, ideas, and insight as to how we might collectively help solve these challenges. So with that, I'm pleased to bring back my co-host, Kaylin.
Hi, listeners. This is Kaylin Reed, and I'm a design futurist at Kimball International and the host of the Alternative Design Podcast. Amanda invited me on the show to help draw some parallels between ThinkLab's latest hackathon results on the future of customer decision-making and what we're seeing more broadly in these sectors. As a foresight practitioner, my job is to look for data and trends that are happening in the design industry and beyond that spark uncertainties about our future. I dive into those uncertainties to identify future possibilities, or what we call scenarios. From there, we can actually begin to establish potential threats and opportunities that can help guide today's decision-making for tomorrow's reality. We do this and much more on the Alternative Design Podcast, which you should totally check out after listening to this episode. Amanda's already touched on the challenges around speed, value engineering, and data in hospitality, especially with the growing demand for hyper-personalized travel experiences. One of the biggest trends we're seeing is using AI to curate unique travel journeys. Travelers can input their preferences, budget, activities, dietary needs, even sustainability values, and AI algorithms generate personalized itineraries, suggest accommodations, and recommend local experiences. This level of customization is transforming the guest experience, moving from generic packages to bespoke journeys. But here's the catch. Consumer decision-making is complex. A 2022 Accenture report called it paradoxical and inconsistent, which kind of makes sense in our unpredictable, very volatile world at present. People are cutting back on everyday expenses, but splurging on meaningful experiences. Think Swiftonomics, if you will. Fans are skipping lattes but spending thousands on Taylor Swift Eras Tour tickets. They're price conscious, yet driven by passion. This directly impacts hospitality design. Earlier in the episode, Carly mentioned the need for iterative design to accommodate diverse and unpredictable needs. One traveler might choose budget flights but splurge on a spa, while another prioritizes eco-friendly hotels but seeks adventurous activities. So, how does this shape the future of hospitality? Well, we could see owners and developers embracing predictive design solutions. Imagine flexible hotel spaces that, using immersive technology, transform from a Malibu yoga studio into a Parisian cocktail lounge, depending on the upcoming guest preferences. Many hotels are already using AI to predict desired services and amenities, and this could extend to the built environment, with guests expecting spaces to adapt to their personal needs and lifestyle desires. Savvy hotels investing in this technology could capture new customer segments. Others might focus on creating flex spaces with more modular and reconfigurable furniture to host more temporary pop-up events, workshops, and retail experiences. In short, the future of hospitality lies in understanding and leveraging predictive data and AI to create personalized experiences that resonate with consumer lifestyles and values. Spaces that can embrace this, whether through that transformative immersive technology or even just adaptable furniture solutions, will be best positioned to thrive.
I always love Kaylin's perspective. So much so that for the final section of this episode, I've invited her back to join me in a dialogue to help all of us digest some of the fantastic ideas that we've gathered as part of this research. So in this last and final section, present 3 of our favorite ideas that were generated from the live sessions that happened in Chicago, Atlanta, and New York, where we brought together all the varying members of the ecosystem around the built environment to really brainstorm these so what ideas together. Let's dive into our 3 ideas here. The first one is not going to shock you because you've been listening to this episode for at least 20 minutes now, is get creative with budget. I will say that these came up both in our hospitality research sessions and our developer research sessions. And what we heard overall is just make sure you're aligning spend with the biggest impact and make sure to bring us ideas proactively. They're trying to move the process on faster and they're really looking for partners that get it, much like the healthcare sector, but it's not about specific knowledge here as much as it is about willingness to change. When we get to the process side of this, it really speaks to this value engineering conversation that we're having. Aligning spend with the biggest impact really grows that trust and is super important to them.
I hate to be the tech person on this show, but there's an interesting opportunity for models to have budget integrations in real time so that everyone upfront is very aware of how different changes in the project, or you take this product out and you can actually see the cost estimation in real time. A lot of that integrated budget consideration is going to be really key, especially to make sure that all of these stakeholders, this very wide project team, is all informed early and often. When we think of the experiential components and the service-oriented parts of the hospitality space, where can we really invest our money wisely, especially to protect our future investments? Right now, we continue to see that this is an experiential economy. We see that things are very service-oriented. We see that people are wanting to go beyond just basic amenities, but they want things to be in alignment with their particular values and with their preferences. That means having a variety of different experiential offerings, from well-being to learning. What is the new type of museum and information translation? Do you have pop-up art shows? Do you have outdoor spaces that can flex? Those are the big investment areas to be talking about.
One of the interesting points, I think it was specifically in the developer section, they were talking about amenities and they were talking about relevance. We often think of value as how long will it last? But one of the questions they're asking is how long will it be relevant? And this conversation came up around cold plunges, which is a big trend right now, a health and wellness trend.
I am a biohacking junkie.
Yes. But you put in these spaces that are very relevant today, but how long will they be relevant? Is this a passing fad? This is some of the data that you heard Luke earlier in this episode talk about. They want to take risks, but they want data to prove it works, but nobody's done it before. You get locked into this loop. So how do we align that creativity, that budget, that impact, that relevance, that longevity in a way that makes sense?
What we're seeing is actually new partnerships that are emerging to share those amenity spaces. So you're sharing some of the risk. We're seeing that you can share common spaces, you can share dining spaces or retail spaces, so that risk feels like it's a bit alleviated, or at least you can bear the burden together. We're seeing right now affordable housing, tacking that on to projects in order to get budget and funding for these amenity spaces. Chicago Public Library just did it. I thought that was an extremely interesting signal of how do we leverage something that's desperately needed, and housing, for the record, is desperately needed. How do we leverage that to be able to offer some of these amenities, especially as we start to see things like the 20-minute city? It's about the proximity of these amenity spaces and really creating these smaller, more hyper-localized communities where everything is within that 20-minute drive. And we see these communities being reformed and reinvigorated.
It's interesting going back to what we talked about in the education episode in our closing dialogue, this I shape versus T shape. And we could almost take that I shape, T shape philosophy to product. Because if you have an I shape product that specializes in cold plunges only, it's going to have a lot more risk to it than if you have a T-shaped product that is maybe applicable and really starting to be able to cross different vertical markets, or maybe transition. If it's in a wet environment, it might have to do this, but then it can transition to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about bringing them these ideas with the biggest impact and bringing ideas proactively, is to really help them figure out how to reduce risk.
It's absolutely true. And something that we're thinking about at Kimball too, in terms of how do we have products do double, triple duty? Because we are seeing that the demand for space is actually being demanded to do double, triple, quadruple duty in terms of in the morning, it's one space, and in the afternoon, it's going to be this. And then in the evening, it's going to be this. Now it gets really nerdy when you think about how these spaces are going to change in real time. Because I've had a lot of facilities folks raise their hand and they go, that's a really cool idea, but who's moving that furniture and how's that being done? In our future of workplace forecast, we had talked about a far out concept in terms of what does it look like for robots actually to redesign these spaces. And before everybody just like hits the stop button and it's just like, she talked about robots, ladies and gentlemen, we're done. I think we are seeing that there's opportunities for robotics and for something that's maybe an easier bite to digest, transformable furniture that can truly do multiple things and that can really be that of the moment support that people are needing for that user experience. We're already having drones that are dropping off medication and Amazon packages. Things like this aren't necessarily so off the wall. I say that not to scare anyone, but just simply educate that how do we actually look at some of these happenings that we're seeing today and go, okay, how could that apply to our industry?
I love that you're bringing robots into this because I think it is going to jog our listeners to really think bigger. The next idea is flip the process. We've been talking about building trust and how focusing on value and bringing them ideas builds that trust. Every project partner would love to be brought in earlier, but we're already hearing that this decision-making committee has doubled. Both our developers and our hospitality entities were the most open to bringing the design team and contractors in early. This was discussed heavily in our session in Chicago. But the key to this is making sure that we're earning the trust to get in the door, adding value immediately, that we're really showing them how we can be a better partner.
I'm thinking about the possible reimagination of even the relationship of these project partners and the longevity of that relationship. Once we get to the end of the road and the project install and everything is done, what does that day two relationship look like? What I think is interesting about hospitality is the speed at which these decisions have to be made begs for a longer relationship with the project partners. They're able to stay on as a trusted partner through that day two and post-occupancy opportunity. Something that we explored in the future of workplace forecast was subscription models. The furniture subscription models would be able to be leveraged in 2030. We were positing it as a way to just think differently about the life cycle of furniture. It begs the reimagination of shaking hands and being done on the project install day, but instead of it being a repeat client, it's a forever client.
I love that you bring in subscription because I think that's a trend in the broader world right now that our industry really needs to take heed of. And I think a lot of the frustration that we heard about through this research is the siloed nature of our work and how that can create issues. I was recently interviewed for an article and I shared information that came from this year's Interior Design Giants of Design. And it's one of the suggestions that I gave in that article because a disruptive thing that's happening on the interior design side is two of the fastest growing firms this year are design entities housed within corporate real estate firms. And one of the suggestions is, are there new ways that we could look at our process that benefit our clients and end users more on this subscription model front? That instead of being in for the front of the project, most of which do not have funds or fees to do post-occupancy work, is there a way that we can provide more value by really rethinking some of our services? And does that help us combat some of these disruptive forces that are happening in our world? All right, let's get to our third and final suggestion here, which I think if you've listened to all 4 episodes, you're going to hear that there is a common thread that is a little bit nuanced for each of these vertical markets. Our third and final idea is empower them to share internally. In hospitality, the nuance was really about empowering them to share with all these diverse stakeholders. You have your owners, you have your investors, you have your brand teams, and then ultimately, sometimes easy to get lost are the actual occupants. And so as you look at all of those different potential decision makers and this expanding decision team, I think hospitality was one of the most important sectors to really empower them to sell on your behalf. How do we empower them to be the hero, to share internally, to manage up, all these different words we've used throughout this mini season?
As you were speaking, Amanda, I was thinking that some of these insights, while they feel perhaps even repetitive, they are nuanced, in fact, the sector for each vertical. something to be thinking about for each of them. With corporate, we talked about well-being and the fact that there's this permeating value of well-being. And for education, they're really looking at the expanded definition of student and what solutions are going to be appropriate and how do we keep that in top of mind. And for healthcare, it's how does the need change with pandemics or these sort of volatile disruptors that are changing up the game at a moment's notice. For hospitality, what's interesting to keep in mind as we empower them to share internally is what is the story? This is an experiential industry, right? So how are we able to translate insights in those shorter formats that can inform stakeholders, but really keep the story and really the brand story in mind?
Well, that's it for this episode, folks. But we don't want the launch of this mini season to be the end. We hope it's just the beginning. So if you haven't done so, we'd encourage you to go back and listen to our other episodes preceding this one on corporate, higher ed, and healthcare. And our hope is that this sparked something for you. If so, we'd love to hear from you. What have we missed? Call our hotline and share any thoughts that this sparked for you. The number is 917-934-2942. We're preparing for season 6 of this podcast, and you just might find your voicemail included. All right, that's all for now. Please be sure to follow Design Nerds Anonymous wherever you get your podcasts. And we'd love it if you'd drop us a rating or review. And stay tuned for season 6 coming this fall.